And go ahead and just share your screen when you're ready.
So again, a big welcome. It's fun to talk gardening while we're looking at all this snow. I entitled this Beyond Compost, but maybe it should be Compost and Beyond. The, uh, the question to you is, what are some ways you can build organic matter and microbes? These are two vital things that make minerals available and get you through drought, get you through all kinds of things because the microbes are really the ones that drive the system. So when I say organic matter, I mean carbon, humus, that kind of thing. Um, Soil carbon is so much the key. The soil on the left, not so hot. Soil on the right, oh, so nice to get our hands into. We can't wait. So when I talk about organic matter, I'm speaking of soil carbon, humus, topsoil, soil carbon, any term you want to use. I'm going to use them interchangeably here. It's that very top dark layer, the chocolate cake in your soil horizons. And oh, it feels so good. It's spongy texture that we're going for and rich dark color, and it smells so good. So some ways to provide that organic matter and the microbes that usually go with it. Manures, compost, yes. And we're going to go beyond compost. There's compost tea. There's even mulching with organic matter. And now a thing called biochar that has become more and more well known. And cover crops and green manures. So let's talk about manure in that list. If you add fresh manure, it may burn your plants. It hasn't decomposed enough yet and it gets too hot. It also uses a lot of nitrogen in its decomposing process. So it's fine to use, and if that's what you have, use it. You'll get some weed seeds. I could always tell exactly where I threw the horse manure on the garden because I'd see a great plume of chickweed following. But still, it was adding organic matter. I just had more weeding to do. If you can compost your manure first, that would be much better. Eliminate some weed seed. And then there's compost. Compost is a great way to get organic matter and microbes. But you know the work routine. You mix your browns, you mix your greens, about 3 scoops of leaves to 1 scoop of grass clippings roughly, and unless you live in Yakutat or layer it, water it, mix it, turn it, and you're forever handling it back and forth, and finally hauling and spreading the stuff on your garden. We usually run short, us gardeners, so we have to buy it. Susitna brand compost is a good one. And then on my website, so I have this business called Good Earth Garden School, goodearthgardenschool.com. Oh, there's so much free information. And the page on the picture on the right is a list of where you can get compost locally if you're in the South Central area. I also brew compost tea in May and early June. So this is a way to spread your compost farther because I just need, maybe a gallon or 2 gallons of compost in about 50 gallons of water. And then I will add microbe foods to that and a lot of aeration with a bubbler and aerate for 24 hours till I've bred thousands more times of beneficial bacteria and fungi and protozoans and nematodes that your soil and plants need. And then when you get the compost tea, you want to use it right away, because immediately it starts losing oxygen and a little die off over a gradual period of time. But compost tea is another way to add the microbes that are going to make the organic matter. So we've talked about manure, compost, compost tea, and then there's mulching. And I'm speaking of using organic materials. Those of you studying permaculture know all about heaping up the wood chips or the straw or the hay or the leaves. So many benefits. Your plants don't dry out as fast. You're adding the organic matter, and it gradually rots and decomposes, all the while feeding those soil microbes that we want to have that are so beneficial. You don't have to water as much, and you're sort of composting in place with this mulching. More recently, we're hearing about biochar. It is the charcoal from your wood stove, or it is charcoal that you deliberately make, but you cut off the oxygen so you get a lot more charcoal. Biochar. What's the point of all this burning and spreading biochar? Each of those little chunks you see in that guy's hand have the cells as, what do you say, little landing sites where microbes can colonize. All those little apartment buildings inside. If you would look at with a microscope at the wood before or after burning, there's still that cellular structure, and now you've got at least the outline of it. Biochar, I'm excited about it because it can host microbes from year to year. It's very, very slow to break down. So compost plus biochar means you've got more drought resistance, and you've got a place for microbes to keep hiding out and expanding from, even if there's a disturbance in the soil, and slowly releasing beneficial microbes. You can buy biochar, but you'll have to ship it. I understand Alaska Mill doesn't carry it. Black Owl is a brand that comes out of the Pacific Northwest. And lots of people are making it and studying about it on the internet. You can see some great fire pictures. It's a lot of fun to think about. Here's the thing, and I'm just learning about this. Even if you're adding organic matter, you see that lady, she's putting on compost, she's side dressing with it. Great, it's a mulch and it'll work into the soil and it's nourishing the plants. Whether you add compost or manure or mulch, you're still losing humus. Why? Because it's still rotting down. It's still decomposing. So you put it on and put it on, put it on every year, year after year, but your soil horizon is getting skinnier at the top just because it keeps rotting down. So are you losing organic matter? Probably. And then there's some soil biologists that are now teaching us about the liquid carbon pathway. What the heck is a liquid carbon pathway? And what are cover crops? So I'm going to answer both questions in the next few slides here. What's a cover crop? That's something you plant deliberately to enhance soil health. Not necessarily to harvest and eat, but they're planted densely like you see in that picture, and the more variety, the better. So you're going to manage your soil ecologically by any bare soil being covered by a cover crop. And shortly I'll show you what kinds you can grow, that is the kinds of plants that make a good cover crop, where you can get them, how to time it, and a little bit about inoculants. So typically in bare spots that you have in your garden or farm, you want to plant a variety. Rye, oats, fava beans, peas, clover, these are all great. See how dense it is? That's purposeful. The peas and fava in this picture are busy making nitrogen. The grass-looking stuff is oats, and that's creating organic matter. So you're going to build organic matter instead of composting. You're going to build organic matter that keeps building. You're going to build nitrogen instead of importing it. And the mineral availability goes way up after cover crop. Roots have reached deeply into your subsoils and pulled up minerals that are there, bringing them up into that upper 6 inches where our plants in the garden are growing. And I think you're going to find it to save you some time and effort. So cover cropping, you don't stockpile materials and then layer it into a compost pile. You don't turn the compost pile. There's no hauling and spreading. You're growing this in place. So this is the confusing part. The minerals in the soil don't confuse physical weathering on the left. The weathering of rock is a very, very slow process, hundreds and thousands of years to grow an inch of topsoil. But on the right, I am speaking of enhancing microbe activity and microbe populations so that they use their enzymes to break down rock, break down minerals, and make them available to plants much faster in a few years. In a few years, you can build a couple inches of nice dark chocolate colored humus in your soil. So it's a different process. It's biological, not the physical erosion of rock. The farmer Gabe Brown grew several inches in 20 years. So this is the deal. Can I grow healthy soil right in place? With cover crops, you do. You get the benefit of organic matter, minerals, and microbes. Why can they build humus? Oh, here's the fun. Well, first of all, I want to ask you, where in your soil is the most intense area of biological activity, where the bacteria and fungi and protozoans and nematodes are most populous, most active? And your earthworms, where? If you guessed around the roots, you're exactly right. Something's going on here. There's an exchange. Every leaf is photosynthesizing carbon dioxide right out of the air and sunlight and magically making sugars out of that. Carbon dioxide plus photosynthesis plus magic, as far as I'm concerned. The plants, the trees, the bushes, they're sending these sugars here and there, but a lot of them go to the roots and they ooze out or exude, or they're called exudates of sugars. And oh, the bacteria feed on these. The bacteria, fungi, it's a feeding fest there. So if it's a bacteria colony we're talking about of different kinds, those microbes that are bacteria particularly put out a lot of glues and gums that bind soil particles together. So they're what we call aggregating soil. They also, particularly the fungi, provide nutrients and water to the plants, because fungi will go way out with their long hyphal strands or mycelium strands and bring in exchange for their sugars, they'll bring in some sulfur or some nitrogen or some molybdenum, whatever the plant is asking for in their chemical language. They're speaking biochemically back and forth to each other. I'll give you some sugars. You go get me some, calcium today. So underneath, where we can't see, and we have to take this by faith, I guess, unless we have a good microscope, this photosynthesis is making root mass, and the root mass is fostering microbes, and the microbes are creating soil. They're humus factories, really, right in the sheath around the roots.
Ellie, we did have a question. I'm not quite sure if you saw that come through by Anne.
Fire away. If you read it, that'd be good.
Of course. Anne asks, doesn't fungi break down minerals much quicker than 20 years? And then she also said, I'm focusing on guilds for my garden.
Oh, yes, the fungi is doing that every day. You're right. It doesn't take 20 years. I used that example of 20 years simply because Gabe had no humus, or maybe 2%, and built it up to probably a foot over 20 years. Guilds are a nice way to keep the microbe diversity high, and so you're right on with combining many different things. The more varieties of plants you have in an area, the more variety of microbes. And so whatever we get thrown at us with drought, heat, too much rain, funny temperature spikes, there's going to be more of your workers available. Somebody in that crowd of microbes is going to know how to get through and keep the exchange going. So Christine Jones, a soil microbiologist in Australia, is calling this the liquid carbon pathway. What? What she's saying is, on the left, we have a decomposition pathway. I am not putting down compost. I certainly make and use compost, and I would mulch with it like that lady is, and I certainly gently work it into the soil, or manure if you have it. It's beneficial, but it keeps decomposing. It keeps disappearing at the end of the season. It's hard to find any. And it releases carbon, sure. But on the right, what we're learning is as photosynthesis happens, and here's a cover crop with lots of different surface areas, much like solar panels, catching every available ray of sun there, it's sending sugars down to its roots. It's green plants in the soil, it's photosynthesis, and then the carbon of the air, carbon dioxide that we've got too much of, is being brought down as a form of sugars into the roots, feeding those microbes, making soil, making humus. So that is a liquid carbon. She's calling the sugars, the exudates, liquid carbon, and that's the pathway. So photosynthesis sends down the dissolved sugars. They exude out the root tips, and the bacteria make glues and glues and gums, and then aggregating soil right there at the root. So when you pull out a plant, a living plant, and you see a nice cluster of clumping soil around it, hurrah! If it all crumbles quickly, like sand through a sieve, needing more liquid carbon pathway going on there. So it's when roots are in contact with soil that all this happens. When you see a picture like this, you think, oh, well, that tree must be growing because there was a little soil somehow washed in there, and that's what it's living off. There must be some soil in that little crack in the rock. We're learning, and I'm learning, it's the opposite. That tree is making soil. There wasn't soil there to begin with. It's making soil by photosynthesizing through the needles, sending those sugars down the trunk into the roots, and the roots sending out sugars and saying, yoo-hoo, grow here, microbes, and start making rock into soil. So we've been taught you get your soil all fixed up. You get a soil test and you put on all these things that it's supposed to need, and you fix the soils for plants. But what Christine Jones is telling us and Elaine Ingham is telling us is no, plants fix soil for plants.
Ellie, we do have another question.
Very good.
Anne said, you mentioned to increase nitrogen to heat up compost and girdwood due to our cooler summers. What's the percentage of nitrogen to carbon to make compost? And what about the percentage for compacted soils in girdwood?
Okay. And I'll give you a quick answer, but this Good Earth Garden School website has a bunch of free information about making compost, and see if that will help you. There's also a compost video you can download or buy for $5 if you want the DVD. So I'm hoping that helps you. So first, your nitrogen question. I'll buy a sack of blood meal, keep it in a squirrel-free, mouse-free container, by the way. And when I'm building my compost and it's just mostly browns and I can't get it to heat up, then I'll supplement with just a dusting of blood meal, maybe every third layer, every fourth layer. It's pretty strong stuff. It's 12% nitrogen. And see if that helps. Or if you don't want to use blood meal, you can use soybean meal or alfalfa meal or cottonseed meal. These are all high in nitrogen, and that's explained on the website too. Compacted soils, mulch with your organic matter, straw and hay and wood chips. Occasionally, if you can, inoculate with some extra microbes to add what you've fostered there, great, with some compost tea or one of those packaged materials that gives you more fungi and bacteria. And does that help you? Excuse me.
She says, yes, thank you. And Ellie, I also posted the link to your website that you keep referring to in the chat as well. So if you guys ever need to reference her website, the link is now in the chat.
What a marvelous host you are. Wonderful.
Thank you, thank you.
This is great. And I love your questions, everyone. So on the left, yes, apply compost, yes, manure, yes, mulch. It helps, but it decays. But a cover crop is building humus, building soil biology. So using the liquid carbon pathway, how do we do this? First of all, any bare soil you have, look at that as, uh-oh, my solar panels are gone. Uh-oh, better put in some solar panels. I better put in something to photosynthesize and make use of sunlight and get growing. Your job is to grow roots. Grow roots. The more roots, the more microbes, the more soil carbon. So you're solving the whole climate crisis, solving the whole climate crisis while you're at it. They're all working down there for you in the roots. Bacteria, fungi, protozoans, nematodes. I read constantly about farmers and gardeners who had a pH of, say, 3.8 when they started out. 3.8 is very acidic. Or maybe a 4.2, you want more of a 7 or 6.8. You can put lime on, and that would be the old style of your soil test says add lime, so you add ground limestone. But what I'm learning is that these little guys you're seeing here under the microscope, they so change the soil that they actually will bring the soil into a new, higher, better, more beneficial pH level just by their activity. So the more roots you're growing, the more photosynthesis, the more soil microbiome, the soil biology, the more you're ecologically adjusting your pH. That's not to say you may still not have to still adjust a little, but boy, microbes are undiscovered helpers. I love this picture. On the left, you see a long column there, a root clump from a perennial grass. In the next column under December, you still see that long one, but ooh, a little wispy stuff from an annual starting to grow, and there's the roots. By March, the big clump of a perennial and the little advancing growth now of white roots coming off the annual plant, annual wheat. By June, finally, you're getting a little growth that's pretty good in June on the annual, but ooh, the perennial roots, roots, roots. So the point is, if you have an opportunity to cover crop for a whole year and then trade places, you're much farther ahead.
We do have another question. Wendy is asking, after you have had cover crops growing for a while, how do you then move them out of the way to use it for other crops?
Ooh, I will talk about this, Wendy. Hang on for just a minute and I'll cover that. So minerals get unlocked. This Gabe Brown that I've mentioned is a farmer in North Dakota. And what he found is he could grow several inches of topsoil. There's the 20 years, but every year he grew topsoil. And it's only because he got hailed on 4 years in a row and it laid down his crop right on the soil where it could rot in. And then he just let it go. So the crops that he had growing kind of sprung new little sprouts and grew. And all those roots did their work. So I'm thinking, along with everything else, you spend less money on inputs like fertilizer and lime. This picture on the left, you see grass that's been cut, but you see a clump of soil, and then down there, nice, long, thick roots. On the right, a clump and wispy little roots. What Gabe learned, and he did a side-by-side study and measured this stuff, fertilizer makes plants lazy. They don't need to grow the big root systems. They just use the soluble 832-16 or 10-20-20 or whatever it was. So what a case for more microbes and less fertilizers. That was the side-by-side study. Fields with no fertilizer had more mineral nutrients available when they did the soil tests. A cover crop cycle, even if you sow in late August, by the time you've cleared out a lot of your garden, and only a little bit grows and then the snow falls, as you see in the middle picture. By next spring, look at that. You have some dead plant material on the surface. Nothing is springing back to haunt you. And by that I mean the cover crops chosen that I'm going to recommend have no clovers in them that might reappear. You just have all this dead plant material, so you've got this mulch, and all those roots are still in the ground, feeding microbes that gobble them up and decompose them. And there's no need to add more. I am sorry. Let me shut that off. So here's the procedure for growing a cover crop, unless you have other questions right now.
We did just have one come through. Jonathan and Jennifer are asking, do you suggest growing cover crop around our existing plants in August?
Yes, I do. I wouldn't have said that a year ago, but I'm seeing that it's beneficial. Let me talk about that in a little more detail in a second. How do you grow a cover crop? You would prepare soil, loosening, raking it smooth, and then sprinkle your seed. And it's fairly dense. By that I mean about a seed every square inch or two. Cover it lightly. Maybe just take your rake over it or throw some potting soil on. Just give it a little cover. If you can mulch it, that would even be better. Water it and let it grow. And let it grow. How much? You can let it grow to maturity and let it stand over the winter. That'll really protect soil and get the maximum. Or you only let it grow a little bit and chop while it's green, juicy, tender. So let's talk about rye. You always hear about rye as a cover crop. There's many kinds of rye, by the way. There's annual rye, there's cereal rye. Do you see that it germinates as low as 34 degrees? That should make your little Alaskan heart go pitter-pat. Even at the beginning or the end of our cold, short season, this stuff will germinate. 34 degrees. That's not hard to achieve. So rye unlocks nutrients by bringing up subsoil minerals. Look at that. It develops roots, 387 miles of them from a single rye plant growing 4 months. All the while, the roots are drawing up subsoil minerals and through the liquid carbon pathway, growing humus. So it's loosening hard-packed soil, even in girdwood. It's adding organic matter from the decaying roots and stems and leaves. It's preventing water and wind from blowing away or washing away your soil and its nutrients. And you're feeding microbes. Hallelujah. So for a long time, I wrung my hands. Which cover crop to plant? I'm going to try this. Should it be rye, oats, barley? Those are all going to germinate in cold temperatures. Alfalfa, buckwheat, mustard, canola, turnips. What to choose? And then there's legumes, the peas and beans and vetches and clovers that actually produce excess nitrogen. Do I choose just one? How do I choose? Well, I finally realized I better plant a mix, a blend. Gabe Brown, our farmer, calls them cover crop cocktails. You want as much diversity as possible. No need to limit yourself to one rye or whatever. Gabe Brown uses up to 19 kinds because you see each plant has its own microbe growing specialty communities and you want that diversity.
Ellie, we did have a couple questions come through. So the first one, Elena says, this can be answered at your leisure, but I will be developing my garden in a space that is comprised of lab tea and feather mosses. Is it necessary to take those things out, or can they serve as a type of cover crop themselves? Oh, feather mosses, sorry.
So this is a wetland?
She says yes.
Okay. Oh boy. I don't know all the answer. I'll take some stabs at it. I've not tried to grow and stuff like that. I can visualize Labrador tea and ferny stuff. You might try chopping everything short. Chop, chop, chop with your pruners and weed whip and one. And then layer cardboard, about 3, 4 layers of cardboard, and then start building on top of it. By that I mean pile on. This is a hugelkultur method where you pile on top anything you can find up to 2 feet high. Manures, straws, leaves, grass, composts, spent grains, in any order, just pile, 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 and plant into that. Maybe a little purchased topsoil on top of that. As the cardboard decomposes and as your layers that you've put on there of organic material decompose, you're building soil, and finally those roots can reach down through, and you have something elevated above the soggy that might be quite a nice little growing system. I'd love it if you took pictures and told me what you learned.
She says, awesome, thank you, I will. And Anne has another question. It says, what do you think about tilling soil versus no-till from microbiology?
Any kind of disturbance knocks out a lot of your soil microbe, but there are times when you have to till, and there are times when you just want to use a very gentle broad fork type going through if you've already got pretty good established soil. I think I have something about that in here. Let's jump back to cover crop mixes. You can see the variety of kinds of roots, and they're all growing different kinds of microbes. Here's yet another way to say this same thing. So if you're in your garden, instead of planting all one bed of broccoli and then all one bed of onions, can you mix it up? They show a whole variety of things, but you can put some flowers and herbs and vegetables in a mix and get somewhat of the same thing and avoid some bare soil besides. Nicole Masters has a lot to say about this. And again, Christine Jones is recommending that you put edible flowers under your orchard trees, again, to build mulch, to build living mulch and microbes. So you're going to grow carbon, and the benefits. Building organic matter, suppressing weeds, living mulch, build nitrogen, build microbe and worm populations, store soil nutrients in the bodies of those microbes, attract predaceous beneficial insects, prevent erosion, break up hardpan, improve tilth, and you can even grow your own compost crop. So if you're short on a nitrogen source for your compost crop, for your compost pile, grow a patch of something like a patch of peas or fava beans and cut it and make that your nitrogen addition in your compost pile. Okay,
real quick, we have another question that came through.
Good.
Melissa is asking, can you do green manure / cover cropping in raised beds?
Yes, you can. In a minute, I'll talk about the timing of those so that it works out quite well. So some benefits. Building organic matter. You can build biomass. If you're grazing an animal, you want lots and lots of soil organic matter. You want erosion prevention. You'd want to choose crops, cover crops that'll really build the biomass, thick cover, and not necessarily chop it. If you want to smother weeds, this is buckwheat on the left. It does a good job suppressing quackgrass. On the right is clover. That's a white Dutch clover, and it grows low. But I don't recommend clovers for your operation, simply because they're hard. when you want to change and grow something else there, these things really become established and become perennials, and they're hard to get out. And then you'll cuss my name. You are somebody who grows bees. You could make a cover crop benefit your bees, something that flowers and they love. Here we have some stock and some alyssum. They keep the bees coming. And a whole cover crop of mix like this for bees makes a lot of things happy. Predaceous insects, and it's still doing all the other things of building your soil, preventing erosion, and so on. Fruit trees. This is a grower who has some fall planted mustard under the fruit trees. The mustard comes up fast, it'll die over the winter, but meanwhile it's growing more organic matter for you and holding the soil in place. All of the roots are going to feed your microbe herd, again, feeding the bacteria and protozoans, fungi, and bacteria, nematodes.
We do have another question. Steve says, I have 20-year-old apple trees that previous owner surrounded with cotoneaster and bark mulch. How can this be changed or augmented to apples?
Oh, Steve, you're outside my knowledge base. It's a good question for the Alaska Pioneer Fruit Growers Association. If you're not a member, it's only $16, and they have this extensive website and everybody shares information. And I'm not much help.
We do have another question from Jonathan and Jennifer. They said, should we allow cover crops to go to seed?
Oh, yes and no, depending on what you're doing. Let me hurry along here. Any kind of cover crop is going to be armor for your soil, so the raindrops don't bounce off and rain absorbs and gets into there, infiltrates. Here's a case, Jonathan and Jennifer, where you could use sweet clover to your advantage. It really spears through compacted soils, but you wouldn't let it grow this tall and start to form the flowers and seeds. You'd want to chop it before that. But the root, the root is a taproot, and it'll go right through gravels and hard pan, anything like that. Sweet clovers deployed at the right time and watched carefully are very beneficial. And they're also making nitrogen. So those taproots drill through. Even dandelions are doing that. They're bringing up subsoil minerals, mainly calcium, and bringing it up to the surface for you. You can build nitrogen, but again, I'd avoid the clovers. And there's some kind of vetch is just fine, and some kind of vetch spreads too quickly, so you avoid it. The brood vetch is what you want to avoid. So all these benefits, all the cover crops can do, and even feed livestock and build nitrogen that you don't have to import. A word about inoculants. The pea and bean family put out exudates that favor a certain kind of bacteria called the Rhizobia family of bacteria, and they can take nitrogen out of the air of those little bacteria and turn it into ammonium, I think it is. That's nitrogen fixation. If you pull up your pea and bean plants, if you grew them and you finally can get out on your soil this spring, pull them up and see if you see little bumps on the roots. That is where those bacteria were fixing nitrogen. By fixing, I mean pulling it out of the air as straight nitrogen and transforming it. But then there's also nitrogen creation, simply because with all your crops, you're growing roots, and that means more bacteria, and the nitrogen in those bacterial bodies is a nice stable way to store it in the bodies of the bacteria instead of soluble and washing off into the road. A little math. Let's say we compare a cover crop versus a fertilizer. In fact, let's use an organic fertilizer that Alaska Mill carries, Sustain 464. 10 pounds of that in your 3,000 foot square garden, or 500 pounds. You apply it in the spring. The nitrogen is used up by autumn. Every garden needs lots of nitrogen to grow the leafy green stuff. About $135. Or let's say you bought 15 pounds of cover crop and a little packet of Inoculant, which is the rhizobia that you just sprinkle on, and it fixes up to 20 pounds of nitrogen by autumn, about $35. Or you can look at it as you get 96 tons of biomass and you apply that and you get 5% humus, or you can plant a cover crop and get several inches of humus, 3 times the amount of available nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and sulfur, and move the pH from, say, 5.8 to 7.1. Such a deal. Here's what I'm recommending. I worked with Alaska Mill and Feed to develop this seed blend for Alaska. It's got Austrian pea, fava, and oats in it. So when you see the pea and fava bean, you know you've got some nitrogen building legumes, and the oats are building organic matter, and they're all with roots in the ground, of course. You can buy it in a jug, 6 pounds. It's a seed mix that looks like that. Alaska Soil Booster. I understand they're out, but they're constantly replenishing their supply. And it has directions on it for how much. So there's a 6-pound jug, there's a 20-pound bag. I think there's a 40-pound bag, or if you need a whole bunch, you can make a custom order.
There is a 60-pound bag available, but you typically have to order that at the front register because it's stored in our warehouse.
Oh, I'm so glad you're here to answer that. Good. All right. The beauty of this combination of seed, it's only 3 kinds, but it will winter kill, meaning nothing comes back to haunt you like a clover will. It thrives in cool soil and our short season, and germinates well in cold soils, and it's non-invasive. So the application rate, about 1.5 pounds will do 100 square feet. So you folks with compact little garden beds, maybe 1 jug would do you. If you want to use an inoculant, on the left is the one you'll find right at the seed racks. I wonder if I have a picture. It's this burpee booster. At Alaska Mill, they have seed racks, and on one of them there's these little packets, and I use about half for my cover crops and half for peas and beans that I plant. And you can't store it, so you might as well use the whole packet. It's nice to have. That's what your packet will look like. You don't have to have it. It's just going to grow roots faster and grow nitrogen faster. There it is. Alaska Mill and Feed. So you put your cover crop in a bowl or bucket, dampen it slightly, sprinkle in your inoculant. It's just a black powder, and it's got the rhizobia in it. And it'll kickstart your formation of those guys, the little nodules on your roots. Let's talk about green manures as another management. It's a crop that you grow as a cover crop, but you chop it while it's still young and tender and turn it under. So you plant your seed, you let it grow, but then you chop it. You're watching carefully. You are being a hawkeye about this. And then you turn it under, plow it under, and replant. So you can do a succession of about 3 green manure croppings per season. At least that was my experience. In this picture, you can see in the middle a brown bed, and that is a bed that had been planted with cover crop, and now we've mulched it and watered it, and it's going to grow. On the left of that is a cover crop that isn't quite big enough yet, but soon we'll be chopping and turning that under. And that black row, even more middle, is waiting for seed, but not very long. We don't want to leave bare soil. So prepare that soil, inoculate if you have inoculant, sow the seed, cover it, water it, there you go. Here's what it looks like. You've sown the seed, not all of it's covered, but most of it. A rake will help cover it, and mulch if you can. Let it grow.
Did
Go
have
ahead.
a question come through. Anne said, I was just thinking, do you have a natural amendment that could be used instead of blood meal to increase nitrogen?
Again, I'd refer you to the website. Blood meal is one of the several that is high in nitrogen. Also cottonseed meal, soy meal, fish bone meal, or even alfalfa meal and urine, and also molasses will work if you dilute some molasses from the grocery store.
And we also have all of those, everything she just listed, we carry them in the Down to Earth brand, which is a certified organic line at Alaska Mill and Feed.
The beauty of Alaska Mill and Feed is long before anybody was talking organic, they always carried these good things and we didn't have to ship them in. And it's just a wonderful array that they still carry and keep up to date. It's beautiful. In this big picture, you can see fava beans, you can see the peas, you can see some chickweed in there too. We want to probably chop all this and turn it before the chickweed goes to seed. That's going to be our determiner. But you're watching keenly. That's the cotyledon, the first seed leaf. Then there's the true leaves that start forming. So anytime after the true leaves start forming, it's time to turn it under if you're doing a green manure. You can chop it, or you can flatten it or crimp it, or you can have something graze through it. She's using my favorite tool, which is a weed whip. No fossil fuel needed, no fumes, no noise, just a nice, feels like a golf club. You get a nice rhythm. And there are scythes. On the big scale, they're using roller crimpers. And you can always use a power tool, a weed whacker. Now it's all chopped down or maybe grazed down. You have a lot of choices. Here's your mulch. You can plant into it. Plant some kale into it, or plant some bok choy into it, or plant some more cover crop into it. Just let it sprinkle over that green mulchy stuff. You can replant immediately. Immediately. You don't have to wait. Some of the experts say wait, but I've never seen any advantage. You've got a mulch mat. You can cultivate it under. You can plant another cover crop. What you've chopped will quickly decompose because it's finally in contact with the soil and the microbes that can munch on it. they're all working. If you decide to cultivate it under as a green manure, you can use a garden fork. There's the broad fork. And Brooke, do you know if you still have broad forks available?
Somebody actually asked this in the chat, and I had responded. We are unfortunately sold out of broad forks. I have to see if Jeff's bringing any in this year. We are receiving a lot of garden tools right now, so they should be getting all of that set here in the next week. But I don't see any broad forks on order.
Well, Jeff was skeptical because they don't sell that fast. They're a $300 item, but more and more people want them and are learning about the virtues of them. So tell Jeff to consider ordering them, will you?
I will. I will send the message along.
All right. A broad fork does a nice job of just loosening the soil, turning stuff under without too much disturbance. And by the way, on the right, in the lower right, that's the brand that Jeff had ordered. It was called Meadow something, but there's many different brands. If you order from Johnny's seed catalog, they have a different brand, and you attach the handles when it comes, so the shipping isn't all that much, but I'd rather buy one at the store myself at Alaska Mill. I have a rototiller. I use it occasionally, and it's kind of nice to turn under stuff that got away from me. It got too big, and I just rototilled it. Gently. I didn't turn into a motorhead about it. But you can see those 3 stages. On the left, she's sprinkling seed where we've just turned the soil. In the middle, that's getting chopped, ready to turn under. And that's the whole process. So again, you can get 3 rounds going. You have some options. Let you go from bare soil to a little growth, to more growth. Do you want to chop it or do you want to let it grow? That's the stage where you make your decision. Here it's really maturing. If you want to gather seed from this and then just let the whole thing fall over, or you go over it with snowshoes in the winter, that's fine. It depends on whether you're grazing or not, or you want a different effect. But avoid the flower heads otherwise, so you don't have a bunch of weeds, seed to deal with. And also on the left, that sweet clover that I mentioned, by that stage is so wiry and so tough that it's very hard to chop down, and the clover in the middle will come back to haunt you. And oats isn't so much of a problem, but still, watch it and chop it. Okay, I think you've gotten enough of this repetition to feel like, yeah, I can do this. So you asked, when do we do this and how do we do this? Depending on the size of our garden. Timing is everything. So I'm going to give you 4 strategies. Strategy 1, can you sneak in a cover crop this spring before you plant your regular crop? Now, this is tricky. I'm asking you to creep out onto your soil where you shouldn't be until it is dry, or you'll leave permanent compaction and footprints. Maybe you throw down boards and walk out on the boards, but you're sprinkling cover crop seed. Maybe you're wearing snowshoes. Can you sow a crop, let it grow? Whatever amount it grows is okay. You're covering bare soil. And now when you're ready to put in your main vegetables, your main flowers, your main herbs, turn it under or throw some cardboard on it or chop it. In the fall, after potatoes are dug, ooh, there's all that bare soil. So spring or fall, can you sneak it in? Strategy 2 is different. Can you do a rotation? Can you dedicate, say, in this picture, 1/10 of your garden that you cover crop? You take it out of production and put it into cover crop or green manure. So GM is green manure, CC is cover crop. Next year, you'll have some rich soil in square one, and you dedicate square two to your cover cropping and rotate. Or this is a 3-section rotation that I was doing with potatoes, general vegetables, and cover crops. So every third year you get back to the same crops. And that's the pictures I've been showing you here. So that's rotation. Here's a 4-year rotation. Can you picture that in your garden? Are there any questions so far?
Yes, we do have one question. Anne is asking, what do you think about using greens, higher nitrogen, instead of having to drive to Anchorage? Any ideas to get comparable results? Any ideas for creating guilds to accomplish this?
I'm not so good at the guilds, but I'm thinking about seed and the variety and just the goal of diverse variety. I have extra mustard seed. I have extra radish seed. I have extra of some alyssum seed. I might throw that out and call it my cover crop just as well as buying from, a packaged product. Is that what you were getting at?
Hi there. Yeah, I'm just looking at alternatives. I'm really wanting to cut down on my carbon footprint in most ways and try to use what I've got and what people have in Girdwood as an example. So I'm trying to actually do some things without having to buy things from the store. And I know this is for Alaska Mill and Feed, and I'm just kind of throwing this out as an alternative to saving different trips driving into Anchorage in my particular case, and for others who might be in that situation in this pandemic and blah blah blah. You know what I mean?
Well, bless your heart. You're thinking about the whole ecological picture. And sometimes it makes sense to spend a little money, and sometimes you can improvise. So I'm loving how you're thinking about how to reduce, but still get excellent results. Strategy 3 of the 4, a living mulch amongst crops. So finally, Jennifer and Jonathan, we're getting to your question. Can you do both? We need a lot more experimenting in Alaska. I want to tell you this story, Interplant Clover under maturing romaine lettuce. This is something I experimented with. I had transplants of romaine, and I waited until mid-June when that romaine was finally pretty much getting into, it was settled and growing, and then it was so dry. I know that's not your problem in Yakutat, but it was so dry where I was, and I scratched along the sides of that romaine and planted clover. I planted clover because I knew it was a legume and would not compete for the romaine for nitrogen because it makes its own. I wanted a living mulch to make shade, and by the time the romaine matured to something that I sent off to market, then I could go through and cultivate the whole bed. So I turned under the clover before it got very well established. That is wiry, but it had served, and now I'm turning under all that fresh green, and I'm ready to plant again. So that, I would like to see you experimenting with things like that. I often plant some lettuce plants under my pea rows because I want to mulch. I want to block weeds, and the lettuce kind of spreads out and does some weed blocking. I'm looking to you folks to experiment with some other combinations. And I have just watched this whole video about Brendan Rocky at Rocky Farms. He's a commercial potato grower, I believe he's in Idaho. He actually interplants a cover crop in his potato beds. Like as soon as he's planted his potatoes, and you know how long they take to come up, he's also throwing a cover crop in there. He's got an attachment on his tractor for it. So all the while the potatoes are growing, here's come up through the potatoes, all these funny little things of oats and barley and one thing and another. And then when he harvests, apparently it's not a problem to have all those plants sticking up there. And it's certainly not no longer a monoculture. And then he'll cover crop again. So strategy 3, experiment, experiment. Any questions?
Melissa just questioned, can you explain what an inoculant is?
Oh, I hurried over it for fear that I would talk too long on this Zoom. An inoculant is a packet of black powder, say it Ellie, black powder. In this black powder is some peat moss that's dried, and it's got the rhizobia varieties of bacteria that then inoculate or start colonies in your pea and bean family. So by adding the right microbe right when you're planting your peas or beans or legumes of any kind, you're getting the starter colony right with it. And as the roots form, there it is right there, ready to jump on board, get fed exudates, and multiply and multiply. So you're growing fatter, plumper roots when you add that inoculant, or colonizer, you might call it. So for, you know, under $4 or whatever it is, there's your right bacteria at the right time in the right place. Does that help?
We do have another question about inoculants, and Melissa said, yes, thank you. But Steve reached out and said, I have some old leftover peat moss. Can this be used as an inoculant?
Oh, I didn't explain that very well. The peat moss is not an inoculant. The peat moss is something to put it in. It's just a storage material, and it's got the manufacturer makes sure it's got the right rhizobium bacteria in it. So peat moss itself is pretty sterile, no microbes. I'm sorry for the confusion.
He said, understood.
Okay. Your questions keep me on the ball here. Strategy 4, something we can all do. I call it spot cover cropping. As you harvest, say, that cauliflower down below there, you're not going to get another cauliflower this season in Alaska. So chop at the base. You can mulch with the leaves, but leave the roots in the ground, but sprinkle cover crop seed in that bare spot. Same with bok choy, because you take the whole plant out, romaine, cabbage, anything you've removed from the garden that leaves a bare spot, sprinkle some cover crop seed. And then there's, I guess this is its own category in a way, but you're seeing my spreading of cover crop seed under, I think those are potatoes. And I'm just kind of getting it going now, thinking somehow it'll live when I cultivate and dig up potatoes. I think I was crazy. But on the right, this was under some hoops, and I've sprinkled cover crop where I have already taken out lettuce. I have already taken out a lot of the edibles, And I'm thinking, okay, hurry up and grow, you and the weeds, and I'll have the bare soil covered. So in review, the 4 strategies: can you fit one in before or after you plant a main crop? Can you cover crop one section and do a rotation every year, 1/4 or 1/3 or 1/10? Can you figure out the timing for a living mulch among crops? And finally, can you spot cover crop and available empty spaces as you harvest? In a minute, I'll ask for questions. I want to just show you the process with some late season stuff. So are there more questions?
Anne's asking, are you sure the inoculants that naturally form in the root structures are just for bacteria?
Is there a concern?
She says, aren't they also working with fungi?
Oh, different inoculants do different things. If you buy a packet of fungal inoculant, then you're going to get some species of fungi, and some of them be mycorrhizal fungi. If you use that burpee booster that we're talking about for this presentation with cover crops, you're getting the bacteria, strains of rhizobia bacteria that benefit legumes. If you add a packet of endomycorrhizal, something from down to earth that you have, you're getting a variety of things just to enhance your whole soil food web. Did that clarify what you were concerned about?
Yeah, it does, Ellen. I was thinking of just the mycorrhizal, that whole thing. It's so much more involved than what you're getting into. And I understand you have the time you have, but I feel like there's a lot that has to be said about fungi and bacteria together to make everything come together the way that nature does that. That's all I was trying to get at.
Oh, okay. Thanks for elaborating a little. Yeah. That picture I showed you with all those different shapes and sizes of roots in the ground and all that variety, and that variety will grow lots of different fungi and bacteria that are all beneficial in the whole soil food web, or soil microbiome, fungi, bacteria, archaea, protozoans, nematodes, all working together. And if you minimize the disturbance of your soil, the fungi can really keep it going and do more and more benefit. And if you're adding something from a packet, you just have to know what you're adding. But roots in the ground is your best friend. So I find it this fun little challenge to try to outguess when the frost is going to kill everything or when it's just going to be a light frost. Now my potato beds, for example, the soil's bare, the temperature's dropping. Uh-oh, the soil temperature is dropping, the air temperature is dropping, daylight gets shorter, the sun arcs lower, frost is coming. You can still sneak in a cover crop. Pick one with a cold germination tolerance. Spinach, fenugreek, fava or broad bean, peas, radishes, barley, rye, and that cool season blend we talked about. We didn't talk about Peaceful Valley Farm Supply, but we did talk about Alaska Soil Booster. So you spread your seed. Here we are in the potato patch, and sprinkle in the seed that's inoculated, raking lightly to get it covered. The watering can representing the watering we did, and the mulch that I put on there was some compost I happened to have finished. So you see a lighter brown, that's some compost mulch. You can see a lot of the leaves on the trees are bare. Doesn't that look like fall? And we're planting. It's all a gamble. Some years I win, and this year I did not. But we tried. But even if you get a little whisker growth like this, you are doing tremendous things. Underneath, roots are growing. Roots are holding soil from wind and rain. Roots are getting exudates out there and growing bacteria and fungi that almost starved in the bare soil. You're feeding them. There they come. And uh-oh, will they be snowed on? Maybe, but maybe not. In the end, finally everything gets snowed on and freezes. It snowed on my little oat patch, but here's what it looks like in the spring. I cannot emphasize enough how nice this is to find this in the spring. Your last stand of cover crop, you didn't chop, you just let it die. This is winter kill. This is nobody coming back to haunt, but lots of organic matter mulching your soil, lots of roots still in the ground feeding other kinds of bacteria and fungi and protozoans and nematodes. Happy day. So you have successfully pulled up minerals, concentrated microbiology, concentrated minerals in the upper growing section of your soil horizons. That's what it looks like close up. Little dead oats and little dead peas and beans. So if you're going away this summer, here's a tremendous strategy. Plant cover crops. Just leave them. Don't leave your garden bare. And a thought about when you clean up in the fall, I would recommend you just leave your crops in place and let them die there. The roots are still in the ground. Slowly, minerals are going back down from the leaves into the soil where you want them. Let them draw down. Leave that root matter, and don't disturb the soil in the fall. Except in the fall, have your fun of pulling up a few of your pea plants and seeing those little nodules.
We did have another question come through. Jonathan and Jennifer are asking, will you do a light till after the winter kill or plant as it stands?
Ooh, you are good at asking good questions. Let's just go back there a minute. In that soil, unless I see a whole bunch of chickweed, which I might flame weed, I would plant right into there without a bit of disturbance. In other words, I would scratch my furrow and drop seeds, or I would dig a transplant hole, but I would not disturb those soil horizons. My soil has been telling me, Ellie, go away with your cultivating tools. Ellie, that's me, Ellie. Just plant into us. Don't disturb it. You've got a layer of humus now. Quit it. So see what's left in the spring and what you can work with.
He said, excellent, thank you.
Okay. You're trying to avoid this, which was potatoes. Take all those potato tops and mulch back on top the beds with them. Leave everything in place as you see over on the right there with the broccoli plants. Even if it's getting drier and browner, it's still mulch. It's still going to help rain and all kinds of water infiltrate or soak in. And down under there, there's soil construction and fertilizer construction going on down in the root zone. So building soil, it's easy with cover crops. I wouldn't forsake any manure spreading or compost spreading, but can you picture now how you might do a cover crop? The only thing I'd caution you about is if you're using synthetic fertilizers, you're just setting yourself backwards. The 8-32-16 or 10-20-20 or anything that's been made synthetically has high nitrogen in it, and it'll burn up your organic matter instead of letting it be. And high phosphorus fertilizers will kill the mycorrhizal fungi that is so essential. If you're using insecticides, fungicides, herbicides, Roundup, all that stuff, you're also killing off your soil food web. And now you're going to have to spend more to keep killing it off and to keep adding fertilizers. And for wherever you can, stop the excessive tilling and cultivating. A little gentle cultivation, great, but not much more than that.
Wendy said, Ellie, I so appreciate the enthusiasm and communication you share with your soil and the joy you share with us. Thank you for your wisdom.
My soil nerdiness is infectious then. Thank you, Wendy. You have lots of choices for organic fertilizers. In the granular form, there's this Sustain, which is a pre-blended mix, so you just spread it at the recommended rates. Or mid-season or with perennial stuff, you can use a liquid fertilizer like this liquid fish. But think in your mind now, where could you grow a cover crop or a green manure? Is there some spot cropping you can do? Is there a section you can devote? So I wish you a great growing season and some wonderful experimentation using liquid carbon pathways. And as much as you can tell me stories and send me pictures, I'll be learning too, because boy, are we on a learning curve and it's fun. So check out Good Earth Garden School for more information. And I'm very grateful to have this time with you and all your good questions. And I will stick around for as many questions as you want to ask.
So Melissa just came in with a question. She says, how much do you mix in compost or manure?
Figure at least a ½ inch deep of compost every year. And manure, usually 4 times that, because it's still decomposing. So I tell people, start with about 3 inches deep of compost if you can get that much, although any little bit helps. And then every year thereafter, if you can produce that much or buy to supplement, about a ½ inch deep. Then you have the choice of cultivating it in or not. I've tried not cultivating it in and just leave that to have the rain carry some down in and some beetles and worms to carry it down into the root zone. Oh, Ashley, you are there. Hi. Cool.
Okay, we do have another question from Anne. She says, has anyone looked at the ingredients in Roundup? I don't even think we sell Roundup in the store anymore.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, hallelujah.
Let me check. Yeah, it's something they sell over at the wholesale division because we do have some commercial accounts that inquire about it. But yeah, it's something we discontinued in the retail store just for the bad chemicals that are in there.
That is wonderful news. The active ingredient is glyphosate, and glyphosate is now, even though there was a lot of suppression of the research, glyphosate really messes up your gut and kills off your gut microbes. It kills off soil microbes, leaves the soil deficient of, I believe it's either magnesium or molybdenum, and is so prevalent. It's like poison. It's 80% in the atmosphere and something like 70% in sneaking into groundwater. Totally bad news, and something you don't want to use in your garden or your lawn or anywhere. Please don't use it.
We did have a question come through. Where did it go? Okay, so Steve's asking, have you had any experience with the compost available through the Anchorage Solid Waste Program?
No. Are they producing again? Unmute, Steve, and tell me what you know.
Okay. Yes, the program's still in process. It's an exchange thing where you take your materials in and you swap it a bucket for bucket, equal volumes. The material that they're using, I'm told, is produced by a commercial outfit up in the valley, but I don't know anything about the process or how it's actually done. We've been using that compost for a couple years now, and it seems to help, but that's all I know.
Okay, great. That's all I know too. I thought the commercial guy that would haul it away was Sitting Organics, but on the other hand, it might be Tracy Moffat. But it seems to be a good product, and it's a nice exchange.
Yeah.
We have a lot of people saying thank you. Cassandra said this has been amazing. Thank you, Ellie, and to everyone with their great questions. They added even more value to the class. All right, does anybody else have any more questions? Oh, one just came through from Andrew. It says, should you forego cover crops and or compost if you are utilizing an organic tea?
I like to use everything. If you're using a compost tea or making a tea out of other kinds of even manure tea or an herbal blend of whatever you use, ground up chickweed and nettles, all those things help. So I'd use them all simultaneously.
I do just want to say thank you, Ellie, for this wonderful class. She does have another class coming up, Slugs, Bugs, and Other Thugs. She taught that class last year as well. And we are recording this class, so once it takes a little while to kind of export and download the class, so we will be sending that out to everyone who registered on Monday. So I will be kind of exporting that class once we end here, but you will receive the YouTube link. Feel free to share it with whomever you would like, but it's always a great resource to look back to just as you kind of garden throughout the season. It's always a good refresher. And I don't see any more questions coming through.
You guys are great. Oh, golly, all good questions. And thank you so much for your hosting and the expertise and putting questions through. You facilitated a good session for us. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate it. I know I learned a lot. So yeah, stay tuned. You can always check for our classes on our website at alaskamelonfeed.com. We do try and post them on our Facebook page as well. And we will be hosting everything virtually this year, which, like I was telling Ellie earlier, it's quite nice because we can actually have more people through Zoom than in our little classroom. And it's nice that people can kind of join us wherever they are. Okay, so if we don't have any more questions, I'm going to go ahead and end this session unless you have anything else to add, Ellie.
No.
Okay, well, thank you so much again, and everyone have a wonderful afternoon.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye now.